I like platformers. Here's 5 platformers that come out in 2025. Those are demos. The games aren't out yet. They come out in 2025. I know it's 2025 now, but it's they come out in a bit. And to be honest with you, most of them won't come out in 2025 either. So, did you ever want to be a little frog that jumps around? I never had the pleasure, personally, but now the Kero Quest 64 demo is here, I can at least see what it would be like. And as it turns out, it's exactly the same as being a little guy that jumps around. Kero Quest 64 is Mario 64, but not in the way that something like a Hat in Time is kind of like Mario 64. It doesn't have the same attitude or a similar moveset or the same kind of collectathon structure. I mean, it does have all of those things, but then on top of that, it's literally Mario 64. And what's wrong with that? Isn't Mario 64 good? Yes, and in a lot of ways, so is Kero Quest 64. The problem is that Mario 64 is a great game that still exists, and which you can play instead of Kero Quest 64. And it's probably a better game too. I know it's probably unfair to compare the two. One is an indie game and another the invented 3D platformers. But the comparison is impossible not to draw if I have to talk honestly about the game, like it's called Kero Quest 64. It doesn't help that you probably own a copy of Mario 64 in some form or another, and therefore it's morally okay for you to pirate it and run it on an emulator. Speaking of that, when you first launch it, Kero Quest 64 looks like it's a fully emulated N64. The old school filter, which is off by default, completely saves the game's visual for me. Without it, it reminds me way too much of running Ocarina of Time on default setting on 2005 Project 64, with a weirdly smooth texture and low polygon count. With it, it looks weirdly PS1. I like it. So I didn't know this when I was recording and when I was writing the script, but turns out this game is made by N64 modders. There's a reason why it looks like high-res Ocarina of Time. It's because it's intentional. I thought it wasn't, and I'm sorry if I came out as judgmental. This information reshapes the whole game as more of a N64 throwback platformer, and for that it's excellent. So back to me being wrong now. The music is fine. It's a little repetitive at times, but not so much that it becomes grating. And some things are different, like the shard portals, which are this game's versions of the star doors from Mario 64. They're kind of everywhere. There isn't a single hub area for the whole game, like Peach's Castle, or at least that's how it is in the demo. And this is good, because it means that you don't have to backtrack quite as much if you want to go to a different area once you finish finding all the stuff in a level. And you don't get kicked out of a level when you find a shard, which makes it feel more like a proper collectathon like Banjo-Kazooie, and less like a Mario 64 clone. Now, I do have one problem with the shard portals. So you can enter a new world or a new section of a level, whatever we want to call them, without backtracking. Great, you can access new platforming challenges, new NPCs, you can lower a bridge and go past it without exiting the level. Excellent, it's just platforming, 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 it's non-stop. Now, would you believe that like an hour and a half of decent but not excellent, and for the most part not even like that good platforming, is incredibly boring actually. There's multiple points of interest in every single map, where there's a series of platforming challenges that lead to, usually, a shard. The problem is that all of the platforming challenges are located in a relatively small area, and once you get on top of a small hill, you can see all of the shards you can collect there. Once you're done collecting a shard, you jump from there to, like literally, midway through another platforming challenge that ends with you getting a shard. This, though, I feel might easily be not even fixed, it might just not be a problem in the full game. If the rest of the world is structured in a way that requires this kind of exploration, it requires different kinds of platforming to go from one level to the other, from one area to the other, then cool, that could easily work. All in all, Kero Quest 64 is alright. Or at least the demo's alright. The finished game might be even better. I like the movement, even if it's very derivative. The camera works pretty well, way better than Mario 64. And after you enable the PS1 filter, it looks really nice. Now, talking about real derivative games, Constance is a bit too much like Hollow Knight. In which way? All of them. The art style is often a little derivative and occasionally staggeringly similar. The movement feels slightly clunkier but otherwise identical, though this one I'm pretty sure is just a demo. The trailer shows a lot more movement options that aren't here at the present. But the worst offender by far is feedback. Taking a strong hit in Hollow Knight feels like actually being hit for real over the head. The screen dims for a second, there's a quick slowdown, a freeze frame, and a low bang that resonates for some time before going away. Constance does the same thing, which makes sense since they're similar games and Hollow Knight does that thing really well. But this feels weird? Whenever I got that big hit, it kinda pulled me away. It reminded me of Hollow Knight so much that it felt weird to be playing something else. The same goes for the feedback on some attacks, like when you break a container, which means that this feeling permeates the entire demo. This is a level of imitation I wouldn't want to see in a sequel, let alone a different game. That said, I don't have a problem with derivative games. It feels weird in this particular case, and it would have felt even worse had I not said anything about it. But Hollow Knight is pretty good, and Constance looks good too. The levels, the structure, not the looks, are actually quite different. There's a fun spin on the trinket systems that uses a grid where you place little drawings. The dodge too is really fun to use and changes the platforming and the combat quite a bit. What else? I like the music. The first song is, again, extremely Hollow Knight adjacent, but the rest is very different, and it's fine. It's good actually, it's really good. I like that the NPCs seem to play a different role here, even if the demo doesn't really touch on the story, so it's hard to say what their deal is. It seems interesting, though. I like the robots is what I'm trying to say. And the big brush that the protagonist carries around makes me smile, it's really big. One last thing, this demo is extremely difficult. It's pretty hard in general as far as demos go, but then the boss is just... I don't know if it's the right fight for the occasion, guys. I've been playing this game for 20 minutes, this is too much. All in all, this one's cool. Though, I saw a lot of people call Bow part of the Teal Lotus Hollow Knight clone when that came out, really tearing into it for some mild similarities. I think playing Constance might actually kill those people. So proceed with caution. Toree Saturn is kind of like Sonic Adventure, bad camera and all. This demo is very short, but I had fun with it, as much as I could have fun with a game like this. Toree, assuming that's his name, is a bright yellow baby chicken that goes really, really fast. And that's all you really need to know to decide if you're on board. In case you need more, here's more. Both levels in the demo have plenty of sharp 90-degree turns and no automatic camera control. Some of those turns are in the air, and if you fall, it's instant death, and you need to perform multiple homing attacks on bumpers by manually aiming at them, or you die. Cool! There's a lot of aim assist, sure, but just like in the Dreamcast days, Toree isn't very good at guessing what you're aiming at. Toree is probably a pretty good platformer if you like this kind of game, but I don't. Orbo's Exodus has a long demo and I went through all of it with a big smile on my face. It's a weird game. Now, I wouldn't normally open with that. Weird is one of those words that rarely means the same thing to different people, which makes it kinda useless for describing a game. In the case of Orbo, though, I'm pretty sure that's what the game wants to come off as. It's unfamiliar, unsettling and off-tilt, but in a fun way. It's weird. As with most demos, the story isn't really there. You're a guy that has to find a way back to his planet, I think, and he needs money to do that, which is why that's the main collectible. There's a bunch of money in, presumably, every level, The level in the demo is massive, with micro levels inside containing series of interconnected challenges, and I fully expect the rest of the game to be the same. What else? It's a unique structure and it works really well for the demo. The moveset is the other selling point of the game, together with the unique writing and presentation. You move so fast, it's ridiculous, and the amount of space you can traverse in the air is very generous, but not so much that you end up breaking the game without noticing. If anything, controlling this guy is a little too hard sometimes. The bigger offender, in my opinion, is the move that lets you shoot yourself in the direction you're looking at, which is a very basic move that you'll be using all of the time. Shoot yourself upwards and you can effectively double jump, on top of having a regular double jump. Easy, unless you want to decide where you're landing. To do that, you have to first rotate the camera up, then jump, then rapidly move it down to look where you're going, and I don't know why, but I never managed to do this consistently. All in all, Orbo's Exodus seems very interesting. I'm glad to report that it's not a funny physics platformer. It's not Squirrel with a gun. It's fine, it's an actual game. Void Collector is a pretty good execution of an extremely clever idea, and one that I hope the full game will take better advantage of. Void Collector is a run-of-the-mill movement shooter with short-timed levels, and that counts as a platformer to me. The twist is in the guns. But in any other shooter you would have an armament of 6 to 12 weapons or a loadout of 2 to 4, here you have the 5 fingers on your hand. If you want a regular gun, you just make the shape of a gun with your hand. Press 5 and 4 on your keyboard to open the thumb and index finger, close the rest, and there it is. If you want a shotgun, you make the barrel thicker by extending the ring finger. A closed fist turns into an uppercut that pushes you and your enemy up in the air, while an open hand drags you closer to your target. The pinky makes for a terrible melee weapon, but it uses no energy, and making a circle with your ring finger and thumb gives you high range but little damage. Making those shapes on the fly is the hardest part of the game, as you have to open and close each finger manually. There is an easier alternate mode, but with it Void Collector becomes just a regular shooter with time trials. Not that those are especially common, but still, the hard version is better. If anything, I wish the demo showed more of what you can do with your fingers, assuming there is more. Some enemies are more vulnerable to some attacks, but they don't have specific weaknesses or counters. If one is close to a ledge, you might want to use a specific weapon with a lot of knockback. Outside of those rare circumstances, I don't see why you wouldn't just use your regular gun all the time. Even if that wasn't the case, even if there were more interactions between guns and enemies, I don't think it would be enough for me. Your hand seems built to interact with the environment, and it's really bizarre that it only does guns. More importantly, it would be a shame if the most unique part of the game ended up being a gimmick more or less equivalent to selecting weapons with the mouse wheel. MainFrames is a clever, unique concept with a clean and charming execution, or at least the demo is. And even though the whole shtick of this version is that it's a selection of random levels from all over the game with absolutely no context, I kinda like the writing. It's clever, it's witty, it shows a lot of personality, and even though it's clearly born of necessity, I doubt anyone likes to spend time working on a demo when they could be working on the real game, it manages to be funny. But what is MainFrames? In this 2D platformer, you play as a floppy disk looking guy, I don't think you're literally a floppy disk, stuck inside the computer. This game has everything you would expect from a great platformer. Classic challenges, classic controls, generous wall jumping, and a twist. Since your little guy is moving on a computer screen, it leaps not from platform to platform, but in and out of windows, like folders and software. The folders themselves contain some platforming bits, like black lines you can step on, red lines that kill you, and stuff to collect. The twist is that you can move some of those folders around with the cursor. You can also switch between the different tabs of a folder, resize them, keep them from moving, and all this while you're platforming, as in at the same time. For example, you might have to balance on a single wall by wall jumping on it repeatedly while fiddling with the other folders and while making sure that you're not switching out of the tab that you're currently jumping on. Or you might have to launch yourself across the screen with a bumper and quickly move the window you jumped from to the other side of the screen to catch yourself as you fall. Some time ago, I reviewed a game called Kato, a puzzle platformer with a strong emphasis on the puzzles. In that game, finding a solution to a room was the hard part, and while executing it wasn't difficult, it still felt like platforming. MainFrames is the opposite. There are puzzles in some of those screens, and sometimes what you need to do is not obvious, but finding the right course of action is always easier than putting it in motion. MainFrames looks excellent, and if you care about platformers in any way, you might want to keep an eye on this. The others are cool too, but MainFrames, if it's as good as it looks, I might become a little obsessed with it. I might already be. I love this floppy disk looking guy. That's all, bye.